Hello, everyone. Our next guest is Rafe Furst. He has won the most coveted prize in poker, a World Series of Poker bracelet. He is also one of the co-founders of the most iconic poker online site, which is Full Tilt Poker. But this is not an episode on poker. It's Rafe's story on risk, redemption, and the inner game of being a human being. I enjoyed this episode because I didn't think Rafe would open up as much as he did. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Vibes, y'all. Hey, Rafe, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, Tristan?
Good, good. Thank you. I just want to let you know that Ryan said hello. So
Awesome.
he's
He's such a
he
great
I,
guy that he connected us.
yeah, I love that guy. He's in my forum and we definitely talk quite a bit. So I told him you were going to be on the show today and he was like, "Yeah, tell him I said hi." So appreciate that. So let's get right to it. You're someone that has had an amazing life. You won a WSOP bracelet. You are a author, investor. You studied AI in the 1990s at Stanford. You co-founded Full Tilt Poker. You are now running a cryptocurrency company that's publicly traded. I'm just wondering what feelings comes to you first when I'm saying that and why?
I so appreciate that question. Um, and yeah, what feelings? So one is like a feeling accomplished, right? Because I don't dwell on the past, and I rarely give myself the opportunity to kind of like sit back and take a victory lap or anything like that. So I think that's really great. So I'm feeling accomplished. I'm also feeling, I don't know if it's not a feeling, but it's like surreal. Like was that me? Like I'm just going, taking one step in front of the other, and I'm oriented towards the future. And so, look back and oh my gosh, it's been like, 30 years and just crazy.
Wow. Well, take us back to not the business part, but the just the emotion of it all when you were at Stanford, because right now AI is the biggest thing, right? Like you see it on everywhere. But
Sure.
what was AI like in the 1990s when college kid
hmm
Rafe was studying it at Stanford? Like, did you even know that it was going to ever get this big, or it was just something that you wanted to do because you studied computer science? So, take us
Yeah.
back to that emotion and how it felt, and to be, you know, at the forefront of AI.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll go back even further because I think the context is relevant. When I was 12 years old, I fell in love with computers and programming computers. I fell in love with science fiction, and I fell in love with playing poker, all around that same time period. And with respect to computers and AI and science fiction, like science fiction, AI was science fiction back then. Computers were just like the dawn of personal computing. you know your Apple Watch has probably more computing power by 1,000 times than my Apple computer did uh at the time. So uh and I was reading, like Isaac Asimov. He was like the robotics guy, the three laws of robotics. And so that was kind of where I got my interest and excitement about this idea that machines could become conscious and aware, intelligent. And I got the bug for, hey, I really want to study computers when I, go to college. And in particular, I wanted to study AI. I went there, partly because I knew they had one of the top AI computer science programs in the country. Now, this is 1986 when I enrolled as a freshman. And um, AI, there was this running joke in the field that it's called AI until it works, and then it's called engineering. Because
Mm.
since the 1950s or 60s, you know, AI people, AI researchers, Marvin Minsky comes to mind, one of the early computer science AI pioneers. All of this hope and idea that we could make intelligent machines that could outpace humans in certain dimensions and maybe eventually all humans. Um, that was a dream. It was very, very far from reality. And if you've heard of the Turing test,
Oh
uh,
yeah, Turing test. I
the Turing
actually
test
just
was,
watched a movie, Ex Machina or Ex Machina.
yeah,
Yeah, Ex Machina.
yeah. So the Turing test was a thought experiment created by Alan Turing, who is like he's like the godfather of computers, of modern day digital computers. And he posed, I think it was in the 1940s, um, or thereabouts, and he posed this test that if you could, if a human could not tell the difference between talking to a machine and a human, then you've passed the Turing test, right? And that was the idea that you have an intelligent computer. Now, it's a matter of philosophy at this point as to whether that's really intelligence or not, but we certainly passed the Turing test, right? We've all been on chat interactions where the computer uh, is clearly it's hard to tell the difference between that and a human. So long-winded way of saying, at the time when I started in the field, it was a lot more aspirational, and the kinds of things that we were talking about wanting to create, and we thought were maybe just a few years away. That's what we're actually first experiencing now, literally 30 years later.
Mm.
And
Wow.
so it, the thought of like truly intelligent machines and true AI has always been just around the corner, but now it's actually here. So it's been
Wow.
just around the corner for since the 1950s. So that's like 80 years, and now it's
Wow. I
here.
mean, it's like you've almost engineered your dream life. I feel like you're always an engineer of it. Because, man, I gotta ask you about this poker thing.
Yeah.
When you were at Stanford, you said you started at 12 years old. Your love for sci-fi and computers and poker, like those are three different things. I was just wondering, how in the world did you get into poker, like at Stanford? Was there like a game of like intelligent people playing poker? Because I would lose at that table.
Yeah. So poker I started, in junior high school, and playing with my friends like everybody else, nickel dime quarter, and I loved it. I just thought it was fun. And when I got to Stanford, nobody wanted to play poker. I couldn't find a poker game. And I'm not sure exactly why. Something about the culture there. It just it was maybe it was too countercultural at the time. It was not uh, at all this I don't know, kind of like really cool activity that it became when the poker boom and the online poker boom came about and televised poker. This was many years before that, and so um, I had to form a game, and so I formed a game with friends of mine who I guess happened to be the degens, uh, and 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 we just loved it. It's the same core people are playing 40 years later. We play together in the same game. We have the same group. We are on WhatsApp every single day, multiple times a day. The game goes on. It's in the Bay Area, but I'm flying to meet my friends in Telluride for an excursion, and we're going to listen you know to blues music, and there will be poker. So to answer your
Wow.
question, it was never I never intended any of this and engineered it. I just followed my passion and my hobbies and the things I loved to do.
It's amazing because I actually, followed why I was in love with poker as well. Um,
Mhm.
and I watched and I played online poker, and to see you be a founder, or, meeting you like 30 years later or 20 years later, I, saw you at an EO event and I was like, wow, that's crazy. You're going to be speaking to us about
Yeah.
your the WSOP bracelet that you got, and also launching Full Tilt, being a co-founder. Can you describe, like, how did it end up that way? Like, you guys were flying high. I mean, you had the life of guys like me watching from TV, that life that we saw on TV. You guys were making lots of money, putting big bets, and being on like you guys were like my Michael Jordan of, like, Daniel Negreanu, Phil Ivey, Ferguson, which I know they're all your friends, but like, how, like, did you guys know what you were doing, or was it something that was did it just come about, and like, it got so big? Did you ever feel like you guys were flying way too high and at some point it was going to come crashing down?
There's a lot in there, so I want to make sure to answer each of these things. So,
Yeah.
um, kind of starting with uh, like how it came about, right?
Yeah.
And I was that same person. Like I think I saw when I was a teenager Johnny Chan
Oh yeah, I
winning
remember
the
him.
World Series of Poker, right? This was before it was like live and the whole card cameras. You couldn't really see what was going on, but they just edited, hours of footage together and they kind of did some narrative on ESPN, which wasn't a big network at that time. And I just like, oh yeah, I totally would do this. Like, if I could be a professional poker player, that would be awesome, right? And so, but I really thought that was, you know, I didn't really think about it because I just was going about my life, and I thought I always wanted to be like a software tech entrepreneur, like create computer games and stuff like that, and I did that, but and I always played poker as a hobby, but I totally idolized the professional poker players, and then as I get more and more into it, um, there was like these early thing like prior to Reddit there was a precursor called the Usenet news groups, and it would be these tech chat forums, and they'd have one on poker specifically, and it was mostly you know computer geeks like myself who were also poker players in these chat forums. This was before online poker existed. Okay, but then you started to see people like Chris Ferguson and Howard Lederer and Annie Duke, like starting to infiltrate these chat forums because they were wanting to talk poker with people who are mathematically inclined and were advancing game theory. So the computer science folks and the math nerds were taking a very technical, what's now known as GTO or game theory optimal approach to analyzing poker, and then you had like the classic pros, which were like brass balls and like staring in the face and like very psychological based cowboys like Doyle Brunson and Amarillo Slim, and so like the two those two worlds sort of started colliding in effectively a Reddit group. And then shortly thereafter, there started to be the early online poker sites. Planet Poker, I think, was the first one, and then Paradise Poker was like the big one, and then it was Poker Stars and sorry, Party Poker and Poker Stars. And by the time I met Chris Ferguson at the World Series of Poker, I think it was 2001 or 2000. When did he the year after he won his bracelet? Um, uh, Already like Party Poker was dominant. Poker Stars was just starting up. It wasn't even a thing. And Chris said, "Hey, I'm launching a new poker site, and it's with, it's with the pros. So it's going to be different than all the other sites. It's going to be like, learn and chat and play with the pros. And, would you and your, Silicon Valley friends like to join us? And, and so I said, yeah. And I made an investment, and I encouraged my friends, Phil Gordon, most notably amongst them, to invest. And then I went traveling. I didn't think anything of it. It was an angel investment. And I had just cashed out of my first startup, and I really wanted to travel. So I wasn't really there in the very beginning to build out the company. But then after I was done traveling and having a good time, um, and my second startup was kind of on the rocks, and Full Tilt was starting to be something, I jumped in, and I started working for the company, and then later on the board, and then in 2006, I won the bracelet, and I was playing a lot during the 2000s in World Series events, and so I represented the site with the gear and all that stuff, and it was a lot of fun. So I just kind of like I merged my two worlds of entrepreneurship, tech entrepreneurship, and love of poker, and that was kind of my life, throughout the 2000s. Um, and it wasn't a plan, but I always had that, like, I was always passionate about all these things, and so um, I think one of my favorite quotes is. I think it's John Lennon, life is what happens when you're making other plans. And so
Mm.
that's very, very been very true for me. I've always leaned into the serendipity and following my heart and my passions and my instincts. Um, and sometimes that's led to, hey, let's do a startup together, or, hey, I'd like to make an investment, or, you know, and so on.
Well, I watched your the final table when you're kind of down in your chips too, weren't you? Where you got
Mhm.
like on, I think there was like three people left or something,
Mhm.
and then Phil Gordon had like whispered something to you or something like that.
Yeah.
How did
Yeah.
that, like, I'm just wondering, did you know at that time that your mathematical skills and your intelligence was going to be your winning strategy, or was it because you talk a lot about game theory and
Mhm.
mathematics? Did that have anything to do with why you won, or do you think it's luck?
Well, there's undoubtedly an immense amount of luck,
That's
um,
awesome.
right? In the short term. So in poker, in the short term, luck is the predominant factor. And over the long run, when you have, played thousands and thousands of hands, skill is the predominant factor. That's a statistical artifact. The skill is a statistical artifact of making decisions with a small edge. Maybe it's 55-45. But if I can be on the right side of that 55-45 hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of times, it's a sure thing that I'm going to end up winning in the long run. But a single poker tournament, even a World Series event where it's over multiple days, is not enough to get to the statistical long run. Okay. So it's a combination of luck and skill. You know, you definitely want to make good decisions, like, positive expected value decisions, not rely on getting lucky. And I try
Yep.
to make a good decision every time, right? I'm not trying to gamble. I'm not trying to get lucky. But in the short run, for sure, luck predominates. And just to kind of give you this a visceral sense of it, four times at the final table, no, no, two times at the final table, two times at the final table, I was down to one or two outs, which was like a 2% probability, 2 to 4% probability that I would survive. I was all in with my chips, and I had like you know a 3% chance probability twice. So that's the chances that I would survive just those two all ends at the final table is diminishingly small, less than 1%, far less, right? So that's how crazy it was. But at the same time, that same dynamic is going on for every single player at the table. So of the final four people at that final table, each of us had survived a similar all-in moment with a diminishing chance of surviving twice. It was a raucous final table. It was probably more variance and volatility in that final table than just about any other televised final table that I know of. And yet, every single person there was a skilled player, a very skilled player. So amongst, the skill distills to the top. And then amongst that, it's who's luckiest that day.
Wow. Well, this is this episode is 11 for my podcast,
Lucky
and
number.
it's serendipitously 2011 for you. Can you explain what
Yeah.
happened in 2011 and your world came crashing down?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Can you
And so you asked,
describe all that?
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So you asked the question earlier, did you think you were flying too close to the sun? Right? Because we
Hmm.
were leading the high life. I mean, there's like a good 4-year period there where we were making gobs and gobs of money. We were distributing $10 million a month amongst 20, 20, uh, 20 owners, professional poker players and Silicon Valley types. And it was just free cash flow. I think we were on a revenue run rate for $1 billion in cash
Wow.
uh, in 2011 when it all came crashing down. And I'll explain that in a moment. But yeah, we were definitely living. I mean, I can speak for myself personally. Flying around privately when I wanted. Um, you know, uh, I was supporting and investing and donating to causes. Um, just really having a great time and living it up and um, going to poker tournaments and spending lots of money on dinners and stuff like that. And it was great. Um, I thought that the fundamentals there of the business were strong enough to totally support it and that the income would keep on rolling. I had no reason to think that it wouldn't. And um, and and yet I probably should have. I probably should have. I was definitely a bit naive and wishful thinking. And there were signs that it was there was going to be an inflection point. There was going to be a crisis because from the beginning, the US government took the stance that online poker was illegal gambling. And in 2006, I believe it was, uh, the government passed a bill. They they didn't want to actually litigate whether online poker was gambling because we had a very strong case that it was not. That it was a game of skill and therefore not like roulette or games that are predominantly
Yeah.
luck, right?
Baccarat.
So, baccarat, yeah, exactly. All the casino games, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so the government didn't want to litigate that. We were happy to litigate it, but what they did, they're very smart in their own right. They played the long game and they passed a series of laws. One set of laws in particular is called the UIGEA, Unlawful Internet Gambling Act, which made if online poker was deemed to be illegal in any state in the union, it was also now a federal crime, or enabling playing online poker was. I'm not sure of the details, but what it did was it made it a lot harder for us to operate, and it made the consequences even higher. It became a federal crime, and so it sort of brought all the online poker companies into danger. And then what happened in April of 2011, and it was a date known as Black Friday. the Department of Justice came in and indicted. I'm not sure if I have the legal terms right. The top four online poker companies in the country. It was PokerStars was number one, Full Tilt was number two, Ultimate Bet, and Absolute. Okay, and all of us were forced to move out of the U.S. Like we were allowed to operate in the rest of the world, but not in the U.S. And the problem for Full Tilt Poker was, unbeknownst to myself and just about everybody except for one or two executives at the company, we actually had a hole in our balance sheet. We owed more money to players than we had on hand. And that was a cardinal sin. We're not supposed to operate that way. In fact, we promised to the world, we made a guarantee that all the players' money was safe and secure. So when the music stopped and we had to stop taking in more money, we couldn't pay out other players. And we were charged later that year in September. I think the original charges were against all of the companies for illegal gambling and and a few other things. But really, it was just they were never going to litigate. They just wanted to get us out. But in September, after the hole in our balance sheet was revealed, they charged us, including myself personally, with fraud and operating a Ponzi scheme. And so that's when it got real.
Did you ever think that you were the scapegoat to uh just for so that they can make an example? Because I feel like the founders of Full Tilt have to pay a bigger price than you guys should have. Or were they just or was it there really fraud going on? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, it turns out that there really was fraud going on, and
Okay.
the CEO of the company, um, he admitted so. He pled guilty to criminal
Wow.
charges. Yeah,
So he took you guys all down with him, all the
he did.
investors, all the co-founders.
Yeah, he did.
Wow.
And but um, I'm not gonna give myself a pass because I was on the board of directors. And so it was my job to oversee the CEO,
Hmm.
right? And so I don't believe that, I'm guilty of fraud, but I definitely feel a responsibility and, have paid the consequences of not doing my proper duty.
I mean, did that destroy you mentally, physically, and emotionally while you were going through all this? Like, how long did
I'm
that
sure.
last for?
Yeah.
What's that? What's that?
Yeah. So that was in September. By New Year's, so New Year's I broke. And
Hmm.
I woke up in a psychotic state on New Year's Day and I had to be hospitalized to be stabilized. And I had never had any history of mental illness. It was definitely the situation that broke me. But yeah,
Oof.
I was embattled for since April. So, how many months? 8 months. Um, and my friendships, because it caused a schism between myself and my friends who are part of the company. Um, it, uh, it it clearly destroyed my finances. I was nearly bankrupt. Um, uh, it strained on my marriage. I would my I didn't care too much about my reputation, but I was getting a lot of hate and things like death threats on social media and whatnot. And uh, yeah, it just took a real toll on my on my well being holistically. I thought I was going to jail.
Wow. Well, you know how there's like PTSD? It sounds like you had PTA, post traumatic ambition, where
Okay, what's that? Yeah.
what's that? It's like, you know, you go so big that all of a sudden you're like, oh man, maybe I could have been, you know, I didn't have to go that big because now, you know, now
Oh yeah.
you're facing something like this. Like, how do you repair your identity after this, right? You have had death threats. You're just everyththing that you've built is like done. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you repair yourself? Like, to not have any mental illness before, or any type sort of you know, thoughts or psychotic episodes, like how do you come back from all of this, or
Yeah,
how
one
did
step.
you?
Yeah, one step at a time, one at a time. I wasn't thinking about anything other than like I was in a bad way. Just recovering from the psychosis and just the trauma of everything. And so it was with the help of my family, right? My wife and my parents and siblings, and I just kind of cocooned uh, at my family home and recuperated and started therapy. Started multiple different types of therapy. And it started me on a more spiritual or personal growth path that I never would have gotten on had it not been for this. Because no reason to. I was flying high. Everything I was doing is working. Um,
Hmm.
and so unless you're forced to make changes, and I needed to make change. I mean, like I'm glad I've made those changes and I'm still making those changes, and it absolutely, you know. But even getting there, it's I liken it to addiction because there is a certain addiction. It's like it is very there are addiction elements to that my whole journey for sure. Addiction to risk, gambling addiction, but just more at a personality level or an identity addiction, an ego identity addiction.
Mm.
There's That wasn't even rock bottom from that
Whoa.
standpoint. That was not even rock bottom.
What was rock bottom?
Several more years. I don't know. I mean, I I can say that at the ultimate level, I haven't hit ultimate rock bottom, but it's been a series of bottoms where I've um, realized that there are parts of my personality, things that I've been parts of my psyche that I've been suppressing for way too long. I wasn't aware of that needed healing, that needed um, you know, I needed support, and so it was kind of like once I got to stability with the psychosis, I'd stabilized again. I was capable of going back to work, and I, ended up jumping into a new startup. It wasn't 5 months before I was on a new startup. We had started having a family. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and so I my I had to reconstitute my psyche and personality enough to function, and that was what was needed at the time. And so
Wow.
I started the parenthood family journey. I started, trying to make money again and get back on my feet financially. And um, but then as things went on, so the things that were unaddressed, they started to creep up. And so I needed to have wake up calls. And the only way I was able to actually receive those wake up calls and get support was through a community that I had joined in 2014 called Leap Forward, and that was several peers, a dozen peers, and then uh, a masterful trauma therapist and named Ronit, who started this community, which was a new container for personal development of people from all walks of life. And that's kind of been my community, my Sangha, if you want to put it in, Buddhist terms, or, my spiritual personal growth community. That was really how I have been uh, able to function and then start to build back um, more and more.
Wow. I mean, if the way I look at it is you've gone through a lot of personal work to get to where you're at today. So when you look at yourself in the mirror today, can you tell the difference between how you looked at yourself and what you saw in the mirror when you were flying high versus now? And like how does that person look to Rafe today versus that person that used to look at that mirror when you had all this success?
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I'll do my best. And I think that at one level, when I look back and I recognize how unconscious I was of unseen forces inside of me, like emotional defenses and coping mechanisms, and 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 strategies for life that were really harmful to myself and others around me. Um, and they were covered over, um, because in general I was doing fine. I'm doing more than fine. I was successful in the outer world, and I didn't even experience on the inside much suffering. I wasn't aware of the struggle that was going on inside, or the disconnect between who I believed myself to be and how I was actually showing up. There was a lot of denial and delusion, magical thinking. Um, so on one level, I was, the person that I see myself as today, that I experience myself as today, is very, very different. There's all these layers of not me, false self, constructed identity that have been shed or at least lessened in terms of their impact in how I show up. At the same time, the core of who I am, who I've always been since the day I was born, I remember deep back into my childhood, early childhood, that person has always been there. And I'm learning to really know that person and appreciate that person at a whole new level. So there's what I'm consciously aware of, and then what I'm not consciously aware of, but is driving the bus, so to speak. And I think, to answer your question more succinctly, it's about becoming aware of that, of all the different parts of me, um, and learning to repattern the parts that are not serving, that are not me, and learning to appreciate and double down on the parts that are really truly me, and that I love, and that are positive for myself and my loved ones in the world.
And I think that positivity and that change in your hyper awareness is that, do you think that's how you attract the world to just, because you're doing awesome stuff right now. You are an investor. You are right. I mean, you've always been an investor, but like you just wrote a book. You are, running a publicly traded company, and then you got into Bitcoin. I think was right after the the poker. Is that the world that you attract in the world because of all those changes that you've made personally? You think that has a lot to do with it?
So here's what I'll say. I think that person was always there, right? How was I able to do all those things, right? Like it wasn't, like I said earlier, it's like I'm just following my passion, right? But I early on, either I was born with it or my parents instilled in me, or a combination. I just had this, unshakable faith that I can do anything.
Oh,
And um, that was always there, but it was like having an accelerator and the brake on at the same time. And so when the brakes start coming off, it's like, okay, well, now I'm able to be more effective and more holistically beneficial. Meaning you know, I like to think that it's my goal to consider the highest good for everyone involved, not just myself. And
Yeah, no,
that's what new.
yeah, no, I really like, when I read your book, this book, I just want to show everyone. It's all about it's all about impact, right? Like not enough investors, I think, talk about the impact because VCs has such a bad name, and you've explained it in a way where it's impactful. And one of the most uh, the biggest takeaway that I had was you invest in people
Mm.
versus investing in the companies. When I read that, I was like, wow, that's awesome. And that's why I'm a big fan, not only because of the poker now, but just as a human being. And because I've done some personal work in the last 3-4 years myself about running a business, and it is all about impact. So like, why bet on the person mathematically? I don't know. I'm like, instead of betting on the business, because it seems from a business standpoint that it's better to invest in the business than in the human. And
Yeah.
there is one thing on this book that was pretty crazy to me. You passed up on Airbnb. Did you pass up on Airbnb because of the founder or because of the business?
That's
Because
a
you talk
great
about
question.
impact. Yeah. So,
That's a great question. There was another question in there too. Maybe I'll circle back into it, but if I don't,
yeah.
remind me about the seeming paradox between investing in people and then making mathematical decisions, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I call that being transrational. So the rational is the least important part, but it's important. So we can double click on that later. But you asked about Airbnb and why did I pass? So the context was it was a pitch contest, and there were 4 or 5 companies, um, two of which actually became unicorns. The other one was called Pact, PACT, undergarments, um,
Oh.
and then the company that I ended up investing in, which is the one uh, that ended up winning the pitch contest, was a company called ProFounder, and I really, really liked the founder, like amazing founder. And it happened to be in a space that I was just in love with, which was equity crowdfunding for startups. And so I didn't even give the others the time of day is the reality.
Mm.
I was just so smitten by this one company that I just focused on that. And so maybe if I had really uh, paused and slowed down and really considered the bigger picture, this, all the companies in this pitch contest, and not felt like I had to choose one, like that was an artificial construct, right? Um, maybe I would have invested in all of them, right? Because as you learned in my book, it's really hard to pick winners at that stage. Impossible, maybe. I don't know. And so when you're faced with that kind of dilemma, the answer is don't don't just invest in one or pick one, invest in all of them.
Yeah, I like that thinking actually. That's a really good way of, because it's really your chances are better. Like it's like being like you use poker a lot. Like the more hands you play, the more chances you have. So it's almost like, yeah, that's the way it goes, right? So but let's go back. I'm going to remind you about the mathematics versus the people. Like how
Okay.
does that work in investing when you're looking to invest in a company?
Yeah. So I think on any individual decision to invest in a startup, I'm mostly concerned with betting on the individual founder or founding team, because and the reason for that is there's really not much of a business there. It's mostly just a dream, a vision, right? And maybe there's some software, or maybe there's a product prototype, maybe, but usually not revenues. Like people aren't necessarily buying the product. It really is just kind of a vision. And if that vision is going to turn into a successful, profitable business, how is that going to happen? It only happens by the sheer force of will and the skill of the founders. And so it's very different than investing in like a large public company that's a whole different type of investing. But when you're investing in early stage startups, it really is about the founders. And so that's when you're making a decision to invest or not invest. Now, popping up a level, if I'm looking at investing in an entire portfolio of companies and I'm looking at what's my overall strategy, there are a couple of things. One is I need to be aware of the statistics, which says, maybe 1 in 10 startups is successful, right? And that's going to have to be the one to make up for all the losses and then some. But the other statistics also show that on average, there's a lot of profit to be made by investing at the earliest stages. So what you do with that strategically, there's really only one answer. You have to diversify. You're not going to be able to pick the winners. And I go through this in the book, but I show that over half of venture capital funds actually lose money for their investors, while the whole of venture capital return as a market is the highest return of any asset class, except perhaps crypto these days. But that chapter hasn't been written. I mean, the results haven't been written but it really so it is kind of this paradox that on the individual level, you're betting on founders, but at a portfolio level, you're investing in a lot of them, and you're not really trying to go too deep into how they're going to do it because you're an entrepreneur. We always have to be thinking about pivoting our strategy. And so I might have invested, like, I'll just give you an example. One of the ones from that pitch contest, Pact, were a quasi nonprofit, and they pivoted from what they did in their pitch before they became successful. And the average startup pivots like I think 1.7 times before they're successful, before they achieve product market fit, which allows them to scale, potentially become a unicorn. So just another reason why you're betting on the people, because they're going to navigate those uncertainties. And some of the most important companies were nothing at what they started out to be. I give an example in the book of Nokia, right?
Oh yeah, remember that.
Right? They started off as like a fishing company in the 1800s,
Yeah.
right? And they pivoted multiple times, very different businesses before they really came onto the public stage. I think Twitter was, I think it was like an internal communication software for a game company. I may have it wrong, but
Jack Dorsey? Was Jack Dorsey still the?
he
Really?
was,
So it wasn't.
but
It was never like. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
a short message thing. I was mixing it up with Slack or something else, but the history of startups is rife with companies that started off as one thing, totally failed as that, but they pivoted before they ran out of cash, and they were able to go to the moon. So it's just important to remember, like in poker, the volatility is really high. You might have an edge, there it might be, but you have to get to the long run. But to get to the long run, statistically, you have to make lots of bets. And the long run is longer than you think. Make more bets than
Hmm.
you think.
I like that. Well, you mentioned crypto, and
Mm-hmm.
what like you said, it hasn't been written yet. And in the first place, like what attracted you to crypto? Is it the technology? Is it, I don't know. Is it because you're betting on the future? I have no idea. Like what?
Yeah.
Because crypto to me, I don't understand it. I feel like you're in like the coolest businesses before they even blow up.
Yeah.
That's like your whole life. You've been
Yeah.
in the ground level of it all. So what attracted you to crypto? What's so attracting about crypto?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's similar to actually the first company that I started, which is an early web company. And what happened there was a friend of mine who was a graduate student in AI. Um, he showed me something that he was like really excited about, and he thought I'd be excited about it too. He showed me this thing called the web browser, and he showed me a web page that he was making for Stanford, and I was like, holy shit, this is really freaking cool. You can actually have text and images, and you can click on, and it links, and you can click, and it goes to another page, and I just like saw the matrix. I was like, this is going to change everything. This is, this is amazing. Like I got to be a part of this. And so for the next 4 years, I was in my research job. I was trying to figure out a way that, I could bring, bring web technology and do some really cool stuff in my AI research job. And, it just wasn't a fit. Like that was a research think tank. And so eventually I decided, together, get some friends together and start a company and whatnot. So it started off with, I just really thought this was amazing. I was fascinated by the technology. I was passionate about it. I wanted to experiment and do stuff with it. I had a similar kind of this aha, like this is going to change everything when a friend of mine from Full Tilt Poker, um, who was working at the company, really smart guy, and he said, "Look, there's this new thing called Bitcoin, and there's this protocol paper called the White Satoshi White Paper. Nobody knows who this Satoshi person is." Got me intrigued. Like, all right. He explained to me how it works, and I was like, at first I was baffled because I was like, okay, I get you're doing distributed computation, but it seems really inefficient. He explained the blockchain is like you have to like append the next set of blocks to the previous and the whole history with every computation. And I was like, no, like this this breaks all the laws that I know about like what you're trying to do with distributed computation. You're trying to make it parallelized, and this was the opposite. And he said, well, that's the point. The point is it's hard, computationally hard, and that makes it secure, which means it's immutable, and you can do this computation out in public. It's transparent. You can have trust. And I was like, oh, fuck. I get it now. That's why it's so valuable. This is gonna replace money. I think this is a much superior form of money than those dollar bills or fiat currency. And so that was, but that was in 2010, 2011. I didn't even like invest in it because there wasn't a way for me to do it except for mining, and I wasn't interested in mining. And so once there was exchanges, I was like, okay, I'll throw a few bucks in and start experimenting. And that's what, was, I don't know, $4 at the time. But,
That's Bitcoin was $4.
it was $4.
Holy moly!
And, like just to give it context, I needed all those proceeds that, because Bitcoin, went up thousands of times. I needed that to survive on after Full Tilt collapsed. So it's not like I'm, sitting here, a Bitcoin billionaire. I'm not. Um, I needed it to support my life. But I was passionate uh, about it. And when altcoins, like, came around, I was like fascinated. And I started thinking, boy, these are like little startups. Each of these different altcoins has a different use case, and a different utility. And it looks a lot like a startup. And so I started thinking of, you know, cryptocurrencies as maybe the next wave of startups and venture capital, and
Mm.
kind of went from there. But it started with, I'm just fascinated. I think this is amazing. I have conviction. Like I can see how this will change lots of things. I want to be a part of it. So and same thing with poker, frankly. It's like you heard that story. It's like I was just passionate about poker. I wanted to, make it like 24/7. So like bring the hobby and the profession together.
Wow. I mean, as soon as I mentioned crypto, you got so excited about it. Um, and it's just, I could just feel the passion at crypto because I know that's what you're doing today. But like, if you could go back, what's something you wish you could go back and feel one more time?
Ooh, gosh, that's such a juicy question. Let me just take a moment to, if we could go back and feel one more time. Honestly, I wish I could feel um, the harm that I unconsciously caused to so many people, not just in the full tilt crisis, but in other crises, other um, ventures or investments that blew up. I wish uh, I could feel that, and have the opportunity to really see with all those people.
Wow. I I feel like you are doing that now. I mean, you're doing something to fix all that with what, writing this book about impact and investing responsibly. Is that the reason why you're doing all this today?
No, it's yes and no. I mean, I think I would say I agree with that. I am doing the work and feeling. Um, excuse me one sec. Hey, Robert,
Hey, you need that room by 5 or just the middle room?
do I need that room? What?
Do you need the office room by 5 done or just the middle room?
Uh, I guess just the middle room.
Just the middle? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Like,
Thanks.
2:30 way done. I'm gonna grab some food.
Thanks.
Thank you.
This is awesome. Who's Robert?
Robert is a friend who's helping us with some handyman type jobs that are too big for my britches. He's an awesome dude.
Oh, wow, that's so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's go back. Is that why you're doing what you're doing today? Is to make up for all those? I mean, that's pretty powerful thing to say. That if you could feel the pain, and I just feel like there's
It's a part of my journey, but it's not the reason why. The reason why am I doing what I'm doing today? It's because I'm passionate about it and I believe it's good for, those around me, myself, those around me, and the world. It's the same as it ever was. It's just that I'm doing it now with the, certain amount of wisdom and healing and um and more humility than I had before.
well. I want to wrap this up because we're hitting that hour mark. And my last question to you is: are you proud of what you've built?
I'm proud of what I built. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Rafe. I'm going to press stop and it's just gonna let it upload and
Yeah.
it will be edited.
Tristan,
Hold
I
on.
want this on the record. You're a phenomenal host. You ask incredible questions. I really appreciate uh, doing this. I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Rafe. I mean, I was selfishly asking about all the poker stuff, so I hope they, it was for me, the poker stuff, but everything else, man, you went deep and I really appreciate that. I just, I wanted to know more about you as a person and as a human being and what you're doing. I'm really happy that we've crossed paths and I'm sure there's going to be more of us talking and I never want to play poker against you. So, yeah.
I'm happy to come on anytime.
Okay. Awesome.